So I can never forget. I was in a meeting and it was one of my first meetings with Indian colleagues. So I was explaining an architecture, was going through the system design, explaining all the decisions that were made in the design. And I was distracted by my colleagues nodding with their head, but sideways. And at that time, what I didn't know anything about Indian culture and body language and all these things. So I started to slow down thinking, oh, I messed up. This presentation is going terribly wrong. They disagree with every single thing I'm saying. And I was almost petrified. At the end of that was like, I was also confused because they were smiling while in my mind they were saying no. So it turns out that after I asked questions, I said, oh guys, you didn't like it. What was wrong? And they said, oh no, we loved it. No, we think it's great. You did a good job. So at that point I was super confused. And then I started asking questions like, but why you were disagreeing with me all the time? And they didn't understand me, obviously, because they were agreeing. So then I asked them why you were saying no with the head. And they said, no, we were not saying no. That's not no. So that is the first time I experienced and I understood that communication, especially when working with people from a different culture, is key, because the feeling that I had for the entire presentation was of extreme discomfort and is something we can fix. Hi, welcome to Grow with Anto. In this channel I talk about my experiences, how I built and I'm building my career as a software engineer. So if you're interested, consider subscribing. So in this video, what I want to mention are a couple of things. One is a book that relates to cultural differences. This book is called The Culture Map, is from Erin Meyer. And in the book, you will see a number of examples and will tell you also how to read specific body language and interpreting your colleagues. And in the second part of the video, I will also describe what has been my experience and what do I do now to make sure I am understanding and reading my colleagues in the right way. So let's see, from the book there are two things that I found extremely valuable, and these two, there is also a table that we can look together. One is related to high and low context communication. What do we mean? High context communication is not just verbal. You are looking at the situation, at the body language of your colleagues, at what they say, but more what they don't say. This is typical of some countries. In Italy, we are pretty much in the middle, but there are other countries like China or Japan or Korea where high context is the way they communicate. And on the other side of the spectrum, there is the low context. Low context are countries like US, Australia, Canada, where they mean exactly what they said. So the communication in that case is extremely verbal, and everything in the context is ignored, is not relevant. So when you put people with culture at the extremes talking together, it's very hard to have a fruitful conversation, because most of the time you can end up with communication, people not understanding each other. And knowing this is eye-opening in your career, because you need to adjust your communication based on your audience, especially if they are not used to work with colleagues from different cultures. So that's something you have to do and recognize. So that's one thing from the book. The second thing from the book is about direct and indirect feedback. What do we mean with that? Especially when providing negative feedback, you can see that there are cultures that are really blunt and direct, and other cultures that are sugarcoating the feedback. And in some cases, this is a big problem, especially during appraisals. And if you're talking with someone that will consider the feedback just the verbal feedback, then you need to make sure you are extremely clear, and you need to provide that feedback in a way that is not relying too much on the context. So, and unfortunately, I think every single one, whoever is providing the feedback and whoever is receiving the feedback, should be informed of this way of communication, because I can only provide the feedback in the way I know how to provide the feedback, and I don't know how you're going to interpret my feedback. So I think what is useful is dumbing down, lowering, simplifying our communication strategy, simplifying the words that we are using, and say what we mean, not what we want the other to perceive. So that's not easy and requires a little bit of prepping even when you are providing the feedback. So being very clear in the communication when providing the feedback, even if you have to label the feedback as this is going to be negative feedback or an area for improvement before you start giving the feedback, will set the mind of the receiver into a negative feedback mode or into a positive feedback mode. I've seen sometimes with colleagues from different cultures, when I was providing a feedback that was a feedback to improve some situation, they were confused. They weren't understanding if I was telling them something negative or positive. So I had to do a step back and clarify that thing. So that's one way to do it, but you have to work out and try to read every single time. So try to understand what is the expectation from your colleague and to communicate very clearly your expectations. So this is what I'm doing every day now. I am extremely clear and I ask for clarification. Whenever I'm in doubt, I try to not give space to personal interpretation, simply because whenever we are interpreting the situation, we are giving space to all our biases that are related to our culture. So you can maybe apply that when you're talking with colleagues that come from a similar culture or from your same culture. But as soon as you start having colleagues coming from different cultures, stop trying to interpret their body language, stop trying to interpret their communication style, and ask clear questions or clarifying questions. Did you mean this? Yes or no? It's a yes or no question that you're gonna ask. And at that point, you can be sure that your interpretation is wrong or is correct. That's one thing. So stop interpreting, start asking questions. Then the other thing is, every time you discuss something, discuss about the task, never the people. Whenever you discuss the task, everybody will focus on how the task can be done better. If you give a feedback on you could have done this better, then it becomes personal. Whenever it becomes personal, people are not listening anymore. They will just absorb all the negativity and feel bad. So that's why the feedback that you provide should be on the task, not on the person. The person will learn how to do the task properly and probably how to change their behavior to improve that task, but the feedback must be on the task. Every time you give a feedback on the person, you're gonna break the relationship with that person. No one likes to hear that they are bad at doing something or that they are bad people. And that, even if it's not your intention, that can be their perception. So focus on the task is way more important than focusing on the person. So I worked in many companies with a variety of cultures, and I think all the best companies were the ones with the biggest variety. And the reason is very simple. The reason is because every time you have so many languages, so many cultures in one organization, you have to find the minimum common denominator. So you need to lower the communication sophistication to a level that can be understood by everybody. And when you have that, you have lower context again, and with lower context, people don't assume things. They just understand what you're saying and not building castles on top of what you have not said. So that's very important. And working in a multicultural environment will also help you to become a better senior engineer. Why? Because when you move from becoming an individual contributor to a senior engineer that maybe is leading a team or is mentoring junior engineers, you have to communicate way more than you write code. So that communication needs adjustment based on the cultures that you are interfacing to. And if you have worked in multicultural environments, that's something you can do. That's something it's a skill that you gained during your years in that organization. So becoming a senior software engineer, I think this is a very good skill. So if you are not in a multicultural environment, trying to use the internet or any other social setting to be mentored about cultural differences. That is what I've done in the past, and I want to thank all my mentors, and some of them don't even know that they mentored me, but I learned so much from people coming from different cultures, how to communicate to them, how to make sure I am understood, and how to improve my communication. I'm still working on that. I come from Italy, and my communication is a lot about body language and also very direct. So I need to make sure I clarify that every single time having a conversation with a colleague from another culture, where I tend to start my sentences. I mean this in an Italian way, so please don't take for face value, just ask questions if it's not clear. So we need to also be aware of what are our own limitations in the communication. So if this video resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know if you have questions down in the comments, and see you soon. Bye!